This video will briefly show you how to interpret dummy-coded variables in a multiple regression. In a previous video, I showed you how to change your categorical variable with many different categories. In this case, we have 4 different categories of the kind of education teacher received, either a GCE, a U.S. Canadian high school, a 12-year secondary education, or other, and create 4 dummy variables. We have created the 4 dummy variables. Now we have GCE, US_Canadian, referring to U.S. Canadian high schools, 12-year secondary education or other, all coded as dummy variables, as you can see here. 1 means they received a GCE, 0 means they haven't, and so on and so forth. In this case, my dependent variable is emotional support, which is the amount of emotional support an outside observer sees in the classroom. Let's go ahead and run a multiple regression with these dummy variables. As you may recall, we always need a reference category with our dummy variables. We cannot put all our dummy variables in at the same time, otherwise we will get misleading results. If we choose one to leave out, then that one becomes the intercept. In this case, I will choose the reference category or the dummy variable to leave out to be GCE. So let's go to Analyze, Regression, Linear. As I stated previously, I want to have emotional support as my dependent variable, and I will include the dummy variables for US Canadian, 12-year, and other as independent variables. So those are the 3 dummy variables, and leave GCE out. Let's go ahead and paste the code, highlight it, and run it. Find my output. Okay, now we have my coefficients of output. How do we interpret these numbers? Remember, I had GEC be my reference category. It becomes the constant or the intercept. Therefore, I interpret this number 5.954 as the mean value of emotional support for those teachers who had a GEC. So if you had a GCE, the model predicts that you will have a 5.954 emotional support as your dependent variable. What are these numbers? This -0.3, this -0.6, and this 0.275. They are deviance terms, or how much teachers vary from GEC teachers. Therefore, if you received a US/Canadian high school education, your emotional support is -0.31 points lower than GCE teachers. So they would have a score of about 5.644 as their predicted emotional support. That is also true for those teachers who had a 12-year secondary education. They would have about a -0.662 points lower than GCE, and those who had an other education would have a 0.275 point higher emotional support than GCE. Moving over here to the p-value column will tell you whether those differences or those deviances are statistically significant. In this case, I have a p-value of 0.136 with a null hypothesis that this deviance term is 0. Or in other words, that there is no difference between GCE teachers and those teachers who receive a US/Canadian high school education. The p-value is above 0.05. I would fail to reject the null hypothesis and say that whether you received a GCE or a US/Canadian high school, it doesn't make a difference on your emotional support scale. On the other hand, if you received a 12-year secondary education, the p-value associated with this term is 0.047. I would reject the null hypothesis. It appears that those teachers have about half a point lower emotional support than those who have a GCE. Those who have others are slightly higher, but that difference, that deviance, is not statistically